He died, just as the ninth man did. It was as if all the air had suddenly been sucked out of the room. Junpei felt his heart beat quicken, and he realized he was having trouble breathing. He could feel cold sweat beating on his forehead and neck. June, Santa, and Lotus looked at the way he felt. All three were frozen in place, their faces white. Oh my god, that's not true, is it? We should make sure. Yeah, right, we should. They nodded to one another and headed for the number 3 door. Wait, not that way. They stopped short and turned to look at 7. He was pointing at the door with no number. I stuck a screwdriver in there to keep the door from closing all the way. It's not locked, so you can go in that way. Where is he? The shower room on the left side of the hallway. I put a broom in there too to keep the door open. We can get in without going through the numbered door, right? Yeah, that's right. Their new destination clear. Junpei and his companions headed to the door with no number. Once into the hallway, it was easy to spot the metal door on the left wall. It hadn't been open when they'd been through before, but now, just as 7 had said, there was a broom stuck between the door and the frame, keeping it open. They looked at it for a moment, and then stepped inside. It smells horrible. Lotus wrinkled her nose and covered her mouth in disgust. Even Santa pinched his nose shut. Yeah, this is pretty awful. I feel like I'm gonna puke. It was just as bad as they said. Perhaps worse. The hideous smell filled the air so thick they could almost taste it. It was sour and smelled of fish, feces, and burnt meat. It worked its way through Junpei's nose and down his throat, bound against the entrance to his stomach. He put his hands over his mouth and struggled to keep what little was in his stomach where it belonged. They didn't have to wonder where the body was. Like there are 2 L's and an R there. They didn't have to wonder where the body was. There was blood everywhere, a few arms of the splatter reaching toward them as they walked into the door. All one had to do was follow the many radial arms to their source. The body itself was behind a divider. June, you should stay here. But please, just do me a favor, okay? Alright. He didn't give her a chance to say no. He put his hand on her shoulder, as if to shove her into the ground like a tent pole, turned and walked toward the end of the divider. It felt like it took an eternity for him to get there. Santa and Lotus followed, timid and nervous as a pair of children. Eventually they reached the divider. They looked at one another and nodded slowly. Junpei put his hands on the divider and peered around the corner. For a moment he forgot to breathe. He felt his heart collapse in his chest like an empty cigarette carton, and time froze. He knew in that instant that he would take the image before him to the grave. What was left of the body sat in a sea of blood. Chunks of flesh torn from the body sat in the blood like tiny islands in a great Red Sea. A vast ragged hole had been torn in the torso, and what remained of his intestines spilled out like fresh spaghetti. Smaller chunks of meat had splattered against the wall and become stuck there as they dried. Globules of yellowish fat had left trails like tiny slugs as gravity pulled them down the wall, even as they dried to it. Just like I said. Santa's voice was strained. Junpei suspected he was holding down some vomit of his own. Just like the ninth man. The detonator in his bracelet set off the bomb in his gut. It looked as though the explosion had been quite powerful. His legs were both bent in an odd, unnatural way, and his left arm had split open, exposing the painfully white bone of his own weight. Clover said that he had a fake left arm. Junpei remembered, god dang it. His bracelet lay next to him. It seemed to have hit the wall hard enough to have shattered the display, which lay on the ground in pieces. Half of his head had simply collapsed. The blood coating almost made it look like raw pizza dough covered in tomato sauce. His clothes, too, were covered in blood. The burgundy tie, the white shirt, the jacket with the yellow piping, and the gray slacks. They were all familiar to Junpei. No mistake about that. Snake, no it's not. His left arm is fake. Whoever that person's left arm is not fake. Notice his voice was unnaturally deep and strained, and Junpei heard it catch in her throat. The squeal of tortured metal made Junpei's teeth curl. It sounded like the noise a ghost would make. No matter how many times he heard it, he never got used to it. Every time it put him on edge. It didn't help that there was a girl nearby who looked far more like a ghost than a living human should. It was Clover. She sat on the edge of the bed, her head drooping listlessly onto her chest. Her eyes were blank and stared across the room at nothing. Her breathing was slow and mechanical. Aside from the rise and fall of her chest, she didn't move. Junpei felt as if even a nudge might cause her to shatter into 1,000 pieces. Snake was probably murdered. Chances are he was killed in the same way the ninth man was. Seven lowered his voice, likely in an effort to keep Clover from hearing what he had to say. There were 4 other people in the room with Junpei and Seven: Ace, Santa, June, and Lotus. Seven looked at each and one of them in turn and continued. It's pretty straightforward. Not that hard to figure out how they did it. First, the killers got Snake to authenticate on the red to open door 3. Then they shoved him into it alone, and waited 9 seconds for the door to shut. Once that door shut, it was over for Snake, but he didn't give up. He probably knew it wouldn't do him any good, but he probably ran into the shower room looking for the dead. There was a small chance but it wasn't like he had anything to lose. Unfortunately, it didn't work. The detonator's only deactivated if everybody who authenticated one day went in uses the dead. And then 81 seconds after he shoved in, that happened. I see. So that's what you meant by killers. Huh. You need at least 3 people to open one of the numbered doors, including Snake. You wouldn't open for Snake in a single killer. Exactly. That means we're looking at multiple perps here. We got multiple perps, but we ain't got a sus. Something about an MO. Well, just in case, I'm gonna make sure. Let's say you're right. When do you think the Snake was killed? When we all split up to look for the parts for the Reds, I think. Right after that, when he noticed he was gone. And that means none of us have alibis. We were all off searching the rooms we'd been assigned, looking for those parts. Yeah, that means anybody could be a killer. Wait a minute, what are you talking about? June seemed shocked. How can you say one of us is a killer so casually? Well, not just one of us. If I'm right, then at least 2 of us are murderers. Why don't you calm down a bit, Seven? What are you going to gain by being so suspicious? That's what Zero wants, you know. What Zero wants. Exactly. This game was set up by Zero, wasn't it? Any game has a winner and loser. Whoever makes it through door 9 is a winner, and those who don't are the losers. Zero is trying to make us fight against one another for that victory. Then you're saying that Zero is trying to split us up by making us fight each other. Yes. That is why we can't let ourselves fall prey to suspicion. We have to trust one another and form a strong bond of friendship. Otherwise, we'll end up ensnared by Zero's manipulations. Then, does that mean that the person who killed Snake? Yes, almost certainly was Zero himself. If there's anyone we should doubt, it should be Zero. He masterminded this game and kidnapped all of us. It doesn't seem reasonable that he would have killed Snake as well. Junpei hadn't really considered that. If Zero had killed Snake, then Zero was on the ship with them. Was Zero still on the ship with them? well, he wouldn't be able to control it like remotely. Of course he was. That was obvious. Zero was somewhere on the ship, but Junpei had no idea where. Junpei mumbled to himself, lost in thought. Where could Zero be hiding? Suddenly, everyone went very quiet. The silence was cold and clammy, and Junpei could feel it crawling across his background around his throat. Again, he had heard the ghosting moaning noise. And moments later, a person who looked more ghost than human appeared. It was Clover. She looked at the floor as she spoke, and her voice was cold and monotone. I think Zero is one of us. Every human body in the room froze. The only sound was a muffled rustling of breath. Eyes darted from face to face. One of those faces was the face of their jailer. But who? Junpei. Said. Well, it's possible. Well, that's possible. Huh? Like Clover said, Zero might be one of us. What are you saying, Junpei? Didn't you hear what Ace said? Exactly. I said we shouldn't suspect one another for no reason. No reason? I've got a great reason. And what's that? The bracelets. He held out his left arm. Why are the bombs on our bodies connected to the bracelets? They're all thinking Zero's hiding somewhere, watching us, right? If he's doing that, then he could just detonate the bombs by remote control if someone did something they weren't supposed to. It would be a lot more precise and a lot easier, but if that's the case, then why is the bomb set off by the detonator in the bracelet? Huh, you got a point. I'm not done. Try applying the same ideas to the Nomad game. All the puzzles here run all by themselves. In other words, Zero doesn't have to be controlling them for the game to move forward. Why is that? Why would Zero bother to do something like that? Junpei let the question hang in the air and looked at the others. It was Santa who answered. So let's say you and Clover are right. Zero is one of us. If that's the case, then it would be really hard for him to keep track of all of us or control anything remotely. That's why all the puzzles run by themselves. That's what you're getting at, right? Yeah. Junpei nodded. 7, when we were talking earlier, you said any one of us could be Snake's killer, right? Yeah, something like that. Alright then, I've got a question for you, Ace. You said something like Zero must be the one who killed Snake, right? Yes, something like that. I can't think of any other explanation. So what do we get if we combine those? They fit together pretty well, I think. Something like this. Whoever killed Snake is Zero. And Zero is one of us. 7 and Ace's theories aren't mutually exclusive. They actually complement each other pretty well. At least they do if Zero is one of us. No one spoke. Their faces were grim, but Junpei wasn't sure if they believed him or not. Finally, Lotus spoke up. What were his motives? His motives, yes. Isn't that pretty important? Why would Zero want to hide as one of us? Oh. Well, that's because, Junpei choked. He hadn't thought of that, and he had to be honest with himself. He had no idea. Bluff it like Phoenix Wright. Come on, man. I don't know. Lotus sighed. Well, so much for making a persuasive argument, Junpei. In other words, you had only circumstantial evidence. I don't really think that's enough to go on. It's enough for Phoenix Wright to go on, just saying. Junpei was painfully aware of their eyes on him, and their disapproval. He tried to find something else, anything else, to look at. Just when he felt he could bear it no longer. They heard a bell begin to ring. It was the clock at the central staircase. 3 in the morning. That means we have 3 hours left. Then we need to move on. Now. 7, Clover, Junpei. I know how you feel, but you do understand that right now, it's important we trust one another, don't you? Junpei couldn't bring himself to respond. He swallowed the words he wanted to say, and sighed. 7 and Clover remained similarly silent. Their eyes were looking at something somewhere else, very far away. We must go. We have very little time left. Ace's words put their feet to moving. They all knew where they were going. Their next destination was Mercury. It sat, bolted to the wall near the stairs that led to the casino and the kitchen, between the two elevators. The Mercury card reader. Junpei stood in front of it with the Mercury card key. Seven had given him the card. I found it when we were checking out the shower room. At least, that's what he'd said. Junpei slid the card through the reader. The light on the reader turned green and made a tiny electronic noise. Now they were ready. Junpei and June had been chosen as the investigators, the reasoning being that they had been E-deck before, and no one else had. As before, Junpei sent the elevator ahead to make sure the floor they were heading to wasn't flooded. As before, the elevator returned as dry as when they had left. Once it had been checked for water, Junpei and June stepped into the elevator. There were only 2 floor buttons they could push, the C and bottom buttons. The rest were destroyed or did nothing when pushed. Junpei hit the bottom button. The door closed. Slowly, they began to move downward. Sometime later, Junpei and June stepped off the elevator into the bottom deck. They stepped off and saw that the hallway, to their right, ended somewhere between 20 and 25 feet from them. The hallway in front of them was a dead end. But not a regular dead end. This is a numbered door. This is the 8th one we found. There were 2 numbered doors on B deck, near the central staircase. There were doors 4 and 5. There were 3 more numbered doors in the large hospital room. Doors 3, 7, and 8. Junpei and June had found another door in E-deck, and Lotus and Santa had found a 7th on A-deck. There was a 6 on the door in E-deck, and a 1 on the door in A-deck. 4, 5, 3, 7, 8, 6, 1. And now door 2 stood in front of Junpei. There was only one thing it meant. Do you think the next door we find? Yeah, I think so. The next one's going to be door 9. Despite himself, Junpei felt excited. There was something about that excitement that frightened him as well. He did his best to put it from his mind and headed back to C-deck with June. Alright, let's open these up. The pieces of paper they'd folded up lay on the ground next to Junpei's legs. There were 7 of them all told. They were written on paper pulled from Junpei's notebook. Why had they decided to vote that way? They decided it wasn't fair to simply ask everyone at once. That would allow people to force others to go through certain doors. Well, that wasn't the only reason. Junpei had proposed the voting system, and he had a plan. It wasn't a plan he wanted anyone catching wind of, however, so he did his best to act calm as he began to open and read a piece of paper. The first one read, Ace requests door 1. Yes, I do. Would you like me to explain why? No, we don't have time for that. Sorry. Let's keep going. He opened the second one. Next to Santa. He wants door 6. Yeah, that's what I wrote. Junpei continued with the 3rd, 4th, and 5th pieces of paper. Clover wants 1, Lotus wants 2. 7 also wants 2. Eh? Well, wait a minute. There's no way I'm going anywhere with the Elephant Man. No. There'd be no point to the voting if we let people change their choices because of stuff like that. But, just give it up, Lotus. It's not like I want to hang out with some exhibitionist grandma. I'm not an exhibitionist. I'm wearing clothes. Barely. So, last I checked, that's not a crime. Maybe, but what about common decency? Nobody wants to have to look at a chick who looks like a half-naked raisin. Arrgh! I'm going to kill you. Guys, please stop. Please, I am so tired of your fighting. Lotus's hair flared out like the mane of an angry lion, and she roared with a voice that shook the walls. With some difficulty, Ace managed to restrain her. Junpei, read the rest. Right. Junpei tore his eyes away and looked down at the 6th piece of paper. He opened it. June wants door 6. Yes, I don't really have a reason, I just felt like it. All of the papers save Junpei's had been read. He did some quick calculations in his head. People who requested door 1, Ace and Clover. This was the door in A deck, near the central staircase. People who requested door 2 was 7 and Lotus. This was the door on the bottom deck and could be reached by taking the elevator to the bottom of the ship. People who requested door 6 is Santa and June. This was the door on E deck and could be reached by taking the elevator near the central staircase down. It took him less than a second to run the numbers. He opened the 7th piece of paper and spoke. Okay, the last one is mine. I want to go through... Guys, I want to go through door 6. I want to go through door 6. Junpei flipped open the piece of paper. It read Junpei, door 6. Of course it did. He'd written it after all. That's a problem. June spoke barely above a whisper, but they all knew what she'd said. None of these teens would be able to go through the doors they want. Clover and I chose door 1. Lotus and I chose door 2. That's not enough people to open a numbered door, however. The digital routes don't match up either. We've got similar problems. June, Junpei, and I want to go through door 6, but our digital route is 5. If we want to open that door, we need a 1. What are we going to do now? What are we going to do? Junpei crossed his arms and did his best to put out his thoughts in order. The others followed suit with little result. Eventually, Clover broke the silence. Why don't 7 and Lotus go through door 1, with me? Her face was cold and flat, as was her voice, but her logic was sound. 7 and Lotus looked at each other. 7, math. Math. The first problem resolved, they spoke up. What about me? Isn't that obvious? Wasn't one of the teams just complaining that they didn't have a 1? You mean, I should join Santa's team? You should join Junpei's team, not Santa's team, Junpei's. I mean, I'm the one that's been doing practically everything. Bunch of jerks. Don't even realize. Clover nodded, her face still cold and emotionless. Her attitude and posture could not have been more different than the energetic girl of only a few hours before. No one seemed ready to contradict her. Her response was understandable, given the horrible situation in which she had found herself. But even so, I understand. I will go through door 6, then. If we do as Clover suggested, we can all pass through a numbered door. No one will be left behind. This seems to be the most reasonable solution. Math. 7, Lotus, what do you guys think? I don't have a problem with it. Me either. Alright then, we're good to go. At last, Junpei and the other 6 had managed to separate themselves into 2 teams. Clover, 7, and Lotus headed to A deck, where door 1 was near the main staircase. Junpei, June, Ace, and Santa, however, took the elevator to E deck. The ride to E deck was a silent one. Alright, let's go. Santa's words jolted them into action, and they stepped out of the elevator into a long straight hallway. Before long, they arrived in front of door 6. One by one, they put their palms over the red. With a soft electronic noise, it authenticated each of them. The door opened, and all at once the 4 of them looked through it. Fortunately, the den was located easily enough. This one had been placed quite close to the door they'd entered through. They gathered around it quickly, and hurriedly placed their palms on it for authentication, one by one. It stopped. Yes, it stopped. The countdown had ceased, but Junpei's heart was still pounding in his chest, like a frantic, thunderous drum. It felt as though it might shake itself up and out of his throat. He'd been through the doors 3 times before, but repetition had not dulled the experience. He was not anxious to find it dulled, however. He hoped to be free of this ridiculous game long before that happened. All right, let's go. With that attempt at good humor, Junpei took a deep breath and began to walk. He jogged down the stairs in the end of the hallway and found himself staring at a large door. It was a heavy thing made of iron and more than a little threatening. He took hold of the bar that served as its doorknob and shoved it in. The room beyond stopped him in his tracks. It was gargantuan and made entirely of metal, none of the accents of wood or tile he'd seen from the rest of the ship. This room was purely functional, but utterly tremendous. Whoa, what is this? Santa got out a few words before awe stole the rest of them. The rest were too stunned to offer anything more than gasps. It was easily the largest room they'd seen, and yet it was somehow closed and oppressive. The ceiling was at least 2 stories high, if not significantly more. It was easily several hundred feet across and appeared to stretch the entire width of the ship. In the center of the gargantuan room stood a massive rounded building. Even from a distance, the sheer bulk of it was oppressive. Junpei could feel the room, the building, even the air pressing down on him. Junpei and the others were standing on scaffolding that crisscrossed the whole area. The proper term was catwalk, Junpei thought, although that didn't seem particularly important. Alright, let's head downstairs. Nearby was a long iron staircase that made its way, eventually, to the floor beneath them. They moved around toward the opposite side of the massive building, following the catwalk. They hadn't said much as they walked, but as they approached the building, they suddenly spoke up. This looks to be the steam engine room. The steam engine room? Yes. The thing that looks like the cross-section of a mushroom is the boiler. You see the 3 round doors near the bottom. Coal is put into those and burned, which heats the water, producing steam. Same thing that drives the steam engine. This one is simply somewhat larger. I see. Even if Ace was right, the boiler was boiling nothing as they approached it. The entire room was silent as the grave. Suddenly, Junpei heard a noise behind him. He turned, just in time to see June collapse to her knees. What are you doing now? Hey, what's wrong? Are you alright? He dashed toward her and wrapped his arm around his shoulders to steady her. It was then that he noticed. You're really warm. Is your fever coming back? Yes, it probably is. But I'm fine. Please, don't worry about me. I just need to rest, and I'll be fine. Her voice was weak and forced, and it said a great deal more than her words did. Junpei carried her to the nearest wall and propped her up against it. She let her head fall back against the wall as if she no longer had the strength to support it, and drew a ragged breath. Her eyes were empty as if she was having trouble focusing, and even speaking seemed difficult for her. Junpei felt his hand ball inside itself into a fist, and clenched tight. His knuckles whitening, he had to find a way out, and quickly. He turned and looked at Ace and Santa in turn. They might not have shared the depth of emotion, but they certainly shared his concern. He didn't need words to express the urgency of their situation. Alright, let's get started. Hang in there, June. I'm going to get you out of here real soon. She managed a small nod before leaning back to rest her head on the wall.